In this video, we're going to take a look at Organic Studio's Alanine Aqua Shimmer. Let's jump straight to the end with my opinion. Pro tip: when you let your pen sit for a couple of days, make sure the shimmer is well mixed before you start using it. So there's going to be a little less shimmer than one might expect, especially in the earlier parts of the writing. Now, turquoise is not my thing, but I will do the best I can to be as absolutely fair to this. There is a blue lean that I like a lot here, so there is quite a bit of that to help save it from just being the turquoise that I might not care for. It shades really well all the time, and there is a bunch of tone variation by pen. Now, the shading is good enough that it shades well on the non-fountain pen paper without any kind of real issue. The shimmer, when it started to go as a result of my mistake, wasn't overpowering, it wasn't distracting from the writing, it wasn't the kind of thing that if you put it in a wrong light, it was going to cause flash burns to your eyes. This is actually really well done all the way through, not just as a turquoise, but as a shimmering ink. I think this could be an ink that they could put out without the shimmer and do very successful things, because some people worry about shimmer inks in their pen. I don't. I like to change things up by using a different pen each day. Today that pen is a Pilot Custom 912 with a music nib. It's inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. To see how I arrived at that opinion, let's take a look at the first writing sample done on Clairfontaine. Looking at the posting nib, which tends to be very dry, this is writing very well. I was really looking at that nib being able to exploit the weakness that this ink could have, and it's reading without a problem. And as the writing goes on, the shimmer does show up. Now, because what you see is the writing, you're not going to see me having to move it around and shake to try and find it. It shades really well. It's not feathering, not spreading. This is doing very well. Looking at the fine arrow nib, it is a bit darker than we had with the posting nib. It doesn't feather, it doesn't spread, it does shade, it does give some shimmer. All of it adding great character to what is being written. Now, this is me copying stuff from a book, but it makes it look like I'm smarter than I am just by the way it's going down on the page. Maybe not the tone itself. I don't know that this is something that, Looking at the Architect nib, it is just a little bit lighter than we get with the Arrow Fine nib. We get no feather, we get no spread, we get great shading. And when the shimmer starts to come through, it does it very well. The shimmer doesn't just show up in the darkest areas, making them kind of disappear, but it shows up, I'm going to say, more intermittently and almost as if it's well placed throughout the writing. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding, no ghosting, great performance. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a TWSBI Vac Mini with a posting nib. A TWSBI Eco with an Aero nib that is fine. A TWSBI Mini with an Architect. The next writing sample is done on a WritePad's reporter pad. Looking at the posting nib, very readable, not any kind of a problem at all. It is a little bit lighter than we had on the Clairfontaine. We don't get any feather, we don't get any spread. We do get a little bit of shading, and some of that shimmer even comes through here, which doesn't always happen on your more absorbent papers. This paper's not made for fountain pens, so the fact that it's coming through is kind of a bonus. Don't laugh at a reporter using this ink. Looking at the Aero Fine nib, it is a bit darker than we had with the posting nib. We get no feather. We get no spread. We get amazing shading. Just absolutely amazing is what's going on there. It looks beautiful. And the shimmer that goes on, as I said in the very beginning, it is not distracting for the writing that's there. Perhaps it could be an issue if you're out in the sun, but in a room, not a problem. Looking at the Architect nib, it is in general a little bit lighter than we had with the Aero Fine nib. We get no feather, we get no spread, we get really good shading. I mean, this, if you don't like shading, you hate this ink. And if you don't like shimmer inks, then you get to hate this ink twice. So you get to consolidate your hate into one place. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding, no ghosting, just great performance. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The next writing sample is done in a FieldNotes reporter's notebook. Looking at the posting nib, we get a little bit lighter than we had on the last paper, about the tone that we had on the Clairfontaine. We have no feather. We have no spread. We do get some shading, not a whole lot. Most of the shading really gets eaten up, and very little of the shimmer is really coming through. The absorbency on this paper is stopping a lot of it, but not all of it, and that's with this nib. Looking at the Aero Fine nib, it is a little bit, just a little bit darker than we had with the posting nib. We're getting no feather. We're getting no spread. We are getting a little bit more shading than what we had in the posting nib. Really, if you look on the second line, it'll become more obvious when you see the word physical, and it's darker than some of the words around it, but science goes lighter to darker to lighter to darker. And the shimmer started to come through here. It didn't on the posting, but it did on this one. Looking at the Architect nib, we get about the same tone that we had with the Aero Fine. As a majority, it's a little tougher to tell, but I'm going to say as a majority of the same tone. We're not getting any feathering. We're not getting any spread. We are getting shading without a doubt. We are seeing the shimmer without a doubt. Again, while I'm saying we are seeing the shimmer, it is not overbearing. This is... I found I like shimmer inks. This one's well done. Looking at the back of the page, there's a couple spots where it went a little deeper into the paper, but it didn't come through and touch the page underneath, and the ghosting is way under control. You can easily use the back of the page.
Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. This smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it.
And here we see the results of the resistance test.
The next writing sample is done in a Portage reporter's notebook.
Looking at the posting nib, it is similar, just a tad bit darker than it was with the Clairfontaine. We get no feather, we get no spread, we get a couple spots where there is some tone variation. Look at the second line at the word function, you're really going to see it. Look at the word of, you see it at the bottom of the O, bottom of the F, lighter on the top of the letters. So it is shading incredibly well. The tone's coming through quite nice. The shimmer, not so much here with this nib. Looking at the Aero Fine nib, it is just a tad bit darker than I think the posting was. We get no feather, we get no spread, we don't really get shading, but we certainly have some kind of tone variation that is happening. Maybe there is a tiny bit of shading, but barely. You see of on the third line is definitely a much lighter tone than everything around it. So there is some tone variation. The shimmer is slightly coming through. Looking at the Architect nib, it is just a little bit lighter than the Aero Fine, probably right about the same tone that we had with that posting nib. We get no feather, we get no spread, we get shading that is absolutely amazing. The shimmer is able to come through without major difficulty, though it doesn't have as much shimmer as we saw on some of the other papers, so perhaps not all of it is making. Made me very optimistic with how this ink did on this paper. Looking at the back of the page, the most noticeable thing is how deep it got in with the Architect. However, none of that came through and touched the page underneath. The ghosting is pretty under control, so you could probably use the back of the page. Maybe not with a wetter pen.
With over 1,000 inks reviewed, let's take a look at some color comparables.
Here is Blackstone Blue Gum. Here is Diamine Havasu Turquoise. Here is Roher and Klinger Verdigris. Here is Sailor Kobe number 44.
The next writing sample is done in an Office Depot reporter's notebook.
Looking at the posting nib, there is the tiniest bit of feathering that's going on, not the end of the world. There is the tiniest bit of spread, not the end of the world. Ultimately, I will call that pretty darn good for what's happening. We even get a little bit of tone variation. I don't really want to call it so much shading, but we do get some spots where it occurs. On the fourth line, you're going to see of as a little bit different in tone than some of the words around it. You will also on the last line see values is slightly different in tone. Looking at the Aero Fine, it is about the same tone that we had with the posting. It has no feather. It has no spread. It has no shade. It has no shimmer. All you get is this tone of the ink. So if we really wanted to be able to look at just what the ink looks like, this is a very good example. Shame that it all went away for it, though. Looking at the Architect nib, it does have some feather. It does have some spread. Both of those, I think, are fairly under control. Not a nib you would use on this type of paper. That said, it does shade. You see it right off the bat in mathematics. You see it in Word. You see it in Alarmed, or mathematicians. So it's there. The shimmer is being eaten up by this paper. It's really not there. All we're getting is this ink in its performance as if it was not a shimmering ink. Looking at the page underneath, you see a ton of dots where I circled where it came through, so there is no using the next page. However, looking at the back of the page, the reason is clear for the massive amount of ghosting. There's no using the back of this page.
While it's nice to find other inks in the same color family, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Here is a black ink by Diamine, Jet Black. Here is a pink ink by Krishna, their Mandara. Here is a yellow ink by Noodlers, their Golden Brown. Here is a red ink by Delta, their Red. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper.
Looking at the posting nib, we get almost no feather. We get almost no spread. I mean, they're there. They are so under control and doing really well. You don't want to really mention that it's there, considering the paper. I think this is doing exceptionally well here. It even shows a bit of shading that goes on, which is something you would never expect in a million years. Looking at the Aero Fine nib, we get about the same tone that we had with the posting nib. We get almost no feather, almost no spread. Yes, they're there. Yes, they're very under control, and I could see you using this if you needed to at work without any great difficulties. Very impressive. It does have moments of some shading. You see it in perception. Yeah, get it? It's almost like a joke, but it's actually there. See it in perception. So there is some shading. The shimmer's not going to happen on this paper. Looking at the Architect nib, we get just a little bit darker than we had with the Aero Fine. We get very little feather, very little spread. Both are way under control. We do get shading, and fairly nice shading. I'm really impressed. You almost never get shading on copy paper, and yet here it is coming through. Shimmer, on the other hand, is completely eaten up by this paper. Looking at the back of the page, the most noticeable thing is the only spots where it bled was on the posting nib. Curious. Now, we see that there's a lot of ghosting. We don't tend to expect to be able to use the back of the page. You can't here. And oddly, if you're using a posting nib, you might not be able to use the page underneath.
So what nib and pen do I think is going to give the best writing experience with this ink?
For me, hands down, a regular to wet flow stub. And that's because this looks great from both the music nib and the Architect nib I was using it in. It, both times, was absolutely amazing. Not everybody's going to have those nibs, but a stub is much more common to get a hold of. You will see that the Fine did give good shading and shimmer, though, so if that's what you want, it could work. It could be perfectly good.
I hope you got something out of this video, and if you did do all that YouTubery stuff, thanks for watching.